To the son who saved this family's business. My father raised his glass and set it looking right past me, then waved me off to pour the wine, like staff. The son being toasted was my brother Trevor. Trevor saved nothing. I did. I had quietly bought the banknote that owned my father's entire company, and not one person at that table knew it. They clapped for Trevor. They thanked Trevor. I filled 12 glasses and said nothing. I didn't correct him. I didn't cry. I didn't set the bottle down. 6 weeks later, my father would be sitting in a conference room begging the daughter he'd called a waitress to keep his life from collapsing. But that night, he still thought he'd raised one child who mattered. What he didn't know was that the daughter pouring his wine had already bought the ground his whole empire was standing on. So let me tell you how a Tuesday dinner turned into the night my father lost everything he refused to share. Our family was Hartwell Freight. That's how people in our part of Ohio said our name. Not the Hartwells. Hartwell Freight. 40 years of trucks, 3 terminals, a logo my grandfather painted himself on the side of the first rig. My father, Gerald Hartwell, ran it like a kingdom. And in his kingdom there was one prince and one girl who answered phones. The prince was my brother, Trevor, 2 years older. Golden, loud, certain. He went to the college Dad bragged about, joined the company as a VP of strategy at 25, and got an office with a window. I went to a state school nobody mentioned at dinner, got a finance degree, and got a desk near the bathroom. Same building, different planet. I was good with money. That was the family joke. Camille's good with the boring stuff. For 9 years, I did the boring stuff. Payroll, carrier contracts, the fuel hedging that kept us alive when diesel spiked. I knew where every dollar in that company slept at night. Trevor knew where the good steakhouses were. Then, 2 years ago, the company started dying. Quietly, the way companies do. A bad expansion, a terminal lease nobody should have signed. Dad had borrowed against everything to buy a fleet we couldn't fill. He didn't tell me, he told Trevor. And Trevor told a bank. The bank said no. 3 banks said no. And Dad came home gray. That should have been the end of Hartwell Freight. It wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is the part my father spent the next 2 years pretending never happened. Before I go any further, if your stomach already turned a little at the words, pour the wine, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because there are people out there who need this story tonight. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I genuinely love seeing how far this reaches. I'm Camille, 31. And what you just heard was only the first crack in something my family spent 2 years lying about to keep their precious story intact. So let me get back to the night the company should have died. The night the bank said no for the last time. I was the only one still at the office. Dad had gone home. Trevor had gone to dinner. I sat with the loan documents under the bad fluorescent light near the bathroom, and I read them the way nobody else in my family ever bothered to. There was a window. A small one. The senior note, the big debt, the one strangling us, was held by a regional lender that was itself being wound down. They wanted that note off their books. They were willing to sell it, at a discount, to anyone with cash and nerve. We had no cash. The company was broke. But I wasn't the company. Here's the part of me my family never saw, because they never looked. For 9 years, I'd lived like the desk near the bathroom. Small apartment, old car. I'd taken the fuel hedging knowledge and quietly run a side account. Legal, modest, patient. I'd inherited a little from my mother's sister, the one aunt who liked me. I'd saved like someone who knew she'd never be handed anything. By that night, I had more than my father would have ever guessed, and I had something he didn't, a clear head and a reason. I didn't tell anyone. I called a lawyer 2 cities away. I set up a holding company, a boring name, Lockstep Holdings, and I bought the note. I bought the senior debt on Hartwell Freight. I bought the thing that owned my father's trucks, his terminals, his logo, his name. Lockstep Holdings became the company's largest secured creditor, and the only human being who knew Lockstep was me. I want to be honest about why I hid it. It wasn't a master plan for revenge. Not yet. I hid it because I knew my family. If I'd walked in and said, "I saved us," one of two things would happen. Dad would take it and erase me, or Trevor would take it and get the credit. Both had happened my whole life. So I stayed quiet and I told myself the truth was enough to know privately. That was my mistake. I thought being right in secret would be enough. The company didn't know who'd bought the note. They just knew the new creditor restructured the terms, eased the payments, bought them 18 months of air. Dad called it a miracle. Then he called it something worse. He called it Trevor. Because Trevor was the one who'd been working the banks. Trevor was the one in the meetings. So when air came into the building, Dad decided Trevor must have found it. Nobody asked the girl near the bathroom. The girl near the bathroom had only signed every operational document that kept the trucks moving, while the so-called rescue did nothing but exist on paper. And that was the moment I realized the lie wasn't going to die on its own. It was going to grow. My family didn't become this overnight. I learned my place early. I was 11 the first time I understood it cleanly. Trevor broke a window with a baseball and blamed the neighbor's kid. I told Dad the truth. I'd watched it happen. Dad looked at me and said, "Don't make things hard for your brother." Not, "Is that true?" Just don't make it hard for him. I learned that day my word weighed nothing against Trevor's comfort. I stopped offering it. That's the wound, if you want to name it. I spent my life believing I would only ever matter to this family as the one who fixed things quietly and got out of the frame. Useful. Never chosen. I told myself I didn't need to be chosen. I was lying, and a part of me knew it. By the time I was an adult, the pattern was furniture. Holidays, Trevor got the toast, I got the dishes. Dad introduced him as, "My son runs the company with me." He introduced me, when he bothered, as Camille. She helps out in the office. Helps out. 9 years of payroll and contracts and the fuel math that kept us solvent. Helps out. Mom might have balanced it. She didn't get the chance. She died when I was 16. A stroke. Fast, no warning. After that, there was no one left to say my name like it mattered. So I learned to say it to myself and stopped waiting for him to. Until the night of the toast, I'd convinced myself I'd made peace with all of it. I hadn't. I'd just gotten quiet about it. When the company stabilized, things didn't get warmer. They got worse, because now there was a victory to claim, and you don't claim a victory by sharing it. Dad started telling the story. At the terminal, at the country club, to anyone who'd listen. We almost lost it all. My son got us out. Trevor walked into those banks and refused to take no. Each telling, Trevor got a little more heroic. Each telling, I got a little less mentioned. Eventually, I wasn't mentioned at all. I told myself it didn't matter. The trucks ran. People kept their jobs. That was the point. I'd done the thing for the right reason, and the credit was just noise. Then, Trevor got a raise. A big one. Hazard pay for saving the family, Dad joked, and everyone laughed, and I processed the payroll change myself. I keyed in the number that rewarded my brother for the thing I'd done with my own money. My hands were steady. They didn't have a choice. And one afternoon, Dad called me into his office. Trevor was already there, and said, "Camille, you're good with the boring stuff, so I want you to help Trevor put together a little presentation about how he saved the company. The Rotary Club wants to hear it." He wanted me to build the slides for the lie. I said I'd think about it. I went back to my desk near the bathroom. And for the first time in my life, the quiet thing in my chest didn't feel like patience. It felt like a decision, waiting for a date. Here's the thing about owning someone's debt. You don't have to do anything. You just have to wait for them to need you and not know it's you. I started paying attention. Really paying attention, not as the daughter, as the creditor. The 18 months of air I'd bought the company was almost up. The restructured note had a maturity date. On that date, Hartwell Freight owed Lockstep Holdings a balloon payment, or a renegotiation, or, if Lockstep refused, the company defaulted and the secured creditor could move on the collateral. The trucks, the terminals, the name. Dad didn't know that date was a cliff. Trevor definitely didn't. They thought the miracle was permanent because they'd never read the document. They never read documents. That was always my job, and they'd stopped giving me the documents that mattered the day they decided I didn't. So I read the company's books the only way I still could, through the operational files that still crossed my desk. And what I found, I gathered. Not dramatically. A folder, then another. The fuel contract Trevor had renegotiated, the one Dad praised. I pulled the actual terms. Trevor had signed a worse rate than the one I'd locked the year before. He'd cost the company money and gotten a plaque for it. The bank meetings Trevor won. I pulled the email chain. The banks had all declined. Everyone. There was no win. The air had come from Lockstep, from me. The emails proved the banks said no, after Trevor's heroic meetings, not because of them. The terminal lease that nearly killed us. I found the signature page. Trevor's. He'd signed the lease Dad blamed on the market. My brother had helped light the fire he was being celebrated for putting out. I kept it all, dated, sourced, boring, the way I do everything. But gathering paper wasn't the hard part. The hard part was doing it while smiling at the people I was building the case against. Because I still went to work every day. I still sat at the desk near the bathroom. And the closer the maturity date came, the more careful I had to be. Because if anyone at Hartwell Freight figured out who Lockstep Holdings really was before I was ready, they'd find a way to take it from me the way they took everything else. So I learned to live 2 lives in one building. In the morning, I was Camille, helps out in the office. I processed payroll. I answered the carrier calls Trevor couldn't be bothered with. When Dad walked past my desk and said, "Get me the Q3 numbers, sweetheart," I got him the Q3 numbers. I smiled. I said, "Sure, Dad." In the afternoon, on my own laptop, on my own time, I was the principal of the company that owned all of it. I tracked the note. I watched the maturity countdown the way you watch a kettle. I read the collateral schedule until I knew every truck by VIN. The 2 lives nearly collided once. Trevor walked up behind me while I had a Lockstep document open. I didn't flinch. I'd practiced not flinching my whole life. I just switched windows, slow like I was bored, and pulled up a spreadsheet. He leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I could smell his cologne, and said, "Still doing the boring stuff?" Then he laughed and walked away. He'd been 6 inches from the thing that was going to end his title, and he'd called it boring. That was the whole problem with my family in one sentence. They never looked at the boring stuff. The boring stuff was where I lived. There was one person who almost saw me, and it wasn't family. His name was Howard Brandt, the company's outside accountant. A quiet, careful man in his 50s who'd done Hartwell Freight's books for 20 years and had never once been listened to. I'd always liked Howard. He was the only other person in that building who read documents. About a month before the dinner, Howard caught me in the parking lot. He had a folder under his arm and a look on his face I recognized, because I'd worn it for years. The look of a person who knows something and isn't allowed to say it. "Camille." He glanced around the lot. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "Always." "The senior note. The restructure 2 years ago." He lowered his voice. "Do you know who Lockstep Holdings is?" My pulse did something. I kept my face flat. "Why?" "Because the note matures in 5 weeks, and your father won't look at it. I've sent him 3 memos. He thinks the restructure was permanent." Howard shook his head. "It's not. When it comes due, the company can't cover it. We default, and whoever Lockstep is, they could take everything." He looked at me, and there was something almost pleading in it. You're the only one in there who understands a balance sheet. I thought maybe you could get him to listen before it's too late. I stood in the parking lot, holding the strange weight of being asked by the only honest man in the building to warn my father about myself. "I'll try," I said. I wasn't lying. I'd already decided how I'd warn him, just not the way Howard meant. "He won't hear it from me," Howard said. "Maybe he'll hear it from his daughter." He wouldn't. But I let Howard keep his hope because I was going to need a man at that table who'd already tried to tell the truth and been ignored. Howard had just volunteered to be the one witness no one could call jealous. That night, I added a line to my plan. Howard Brandt gets a seat at the dinner. Let the accountant be in the room when the numbers come out. If anyone watching has ever quietly held the receipts on someone who underestimated you, keep this between us for one more minute, because I want you to predict what you'd have done with what I found next. Hold that thought, because the next thing I found wasn't about the company. It was about my mother. I was pulling old files for the maturity calculation when I found a folder Dad had never thought I'd see. My mother's estate documents, and inside, a designation I'd never been told about. When Mom died, she'd left a small life insurance policy. The beneficiary line had my name on it, Camille Hartwell, a modest amount, $15,000, meant for me, at 16, for college. It had been redirected, cashed by the estate, spent. The paperwork showed where it went. Trevor's first car. My mother's last gift to me bought my brother a Mustang when he turned 18. And no one ever told me. For 15 years, I'd thought there was nothing. There had been something. They'd just decided, the way they decided everything, that it belonged to him. I sat at my desk near the bathroom, and I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I sat there, and I felt the last soft thing in me about these people quietly turn off. Not into hate, into clarity. They'd taken the money a dead woman left me, and they'd never once felt they needed to mention it. But clarity isn't proof. And I don't move on a feeling. So I did what I always do. I made it boring. I made it undeniable. I pulled the policy number off the estate folder, and I called the insurance carrier. It took 4 phone calls and a lot of holding, but I got the disbursement record. The beneficiary at the time of payout had been changed from me to the estate 2 weeks after Mom died while I was a minor. The check had cleared into a household account. From there, it took one more afternoon with the old family checkbook register. Dad kept everything. The man never threw out a single piece of paper, which was about to be the most useful trait he had. To find the line. The amount, almost to the dollar, paid out the month before Trevor's 18th birthday. To the Ford dealership on Route 9, I photographed every page. I had Ruth pull the carrier's official record, so it wasn't just my word against a dead woman's signature. By the end of that week, I didn't have a feeling anymore. I had a chain. Carrier to estate to dealership. Clean. Boring. The kind of thing you can't laugh off at a dinner table. That same week, Howard caught me in the hall outside the file room. He'd seen me requesting old records. "You're building something," he said. Not an accusation. Almost relief. "I'm reading the documents," I said. "Somebody should." He looked at me for a long second. "For 20 years, I've watched this family use you like a calculator and tell everyone you were a charity case." His jaw worked. "Whatever you're reading toward, when you get there, I'll back the numbers. On the record. I'm tired of being the only honest man in a building that doesn't want one." I'd just gotten my second witness, the kind no one could call jealous, twice over. That was the night I stopped waiting for a date. I set one. The maturity of the note. The day Hartwell Freight would need lockstep holdings to survive. It fell on the same week as the dinner. Dad's appreciation dinner, he was calling it now. 12 people, the senior managers, the company's accountant, the family. A celebration of the comeback. A celebration of Trevor. I RSVP'd yes, not for reconciliation. I went because I knew my father would do something I could never unknow, and I wanted to be in the room when he did. with everything I'd gathered already sitting in a lawyer's office 2 cities away. I just didn't think he'd hand me the wine bottle. Even I underestimated him. In the 3 weeks before the dinner, the building got nervous, and I was the only one who knew why. Howard's memos had finally rattled something loose. Dad couldn't read a balance sheet, but he could read a worried accountant, and Howard had stopped pretending things were fine. So my father did what he always did when he was scared. He got loud about being confident. He called an all-hands meeting at the main terminal. 70 people on metal folding chairs in the cold warehouse, and Dad up on a pallet, Jack like a man giving a campaign speech. "There's been some talk about the company's finances," he said. "I want to put it to rest. We are stronger than we have ever been. My son led us through the storm, and we are not going back." He pointed at Trevor. Applause. The obligatory kind. I stood at the back near the loading door, where I always stood, and watched 70 people I was responsible for clap for a story that wasn't true. That was the moment the plan stopped being about me. Because if the note defaulted and a stranger held it, those 70 people were gone. Dale's drivers, Priya's dock crew, the dispatcher with 3 kids who'd worked there longer than I'd been alive. My father was standing on a pallet, Jack promising them safety he couldn't deliver. And the only thing standing between them and the cliff was a woman he'd never once introduced by her real job. After the meeting, Dale found me by the door. Dale ran the North Terminal. Gruff, decent, the kind of man who notices who actually does the work. He'd always been kind to me in the small ways that cost him nothing and meant everything. "You believe all that?" he asked, low, nodding at the pallet jack. I picked my words. "I believe the company's going to be fine." He studied me a second. "You know something." "I know the numbers, Dale. I always have." He nodded slowly, like that was answer enough. And he was right. "Whatever happens," he said, "the floor crew trusts you more than they trust the suits. For whatever that's worth." It was worth more than he knew. I filed it away. When the truth came out, I'd need people who already believed in me, without being told to. 10 days before the dinner, the thing I'd been most afraid of nearly happened. Trevor came back from a lender lunch rattled. I heard it through the wall of Dad's office. Trevor's voice, too high. A banker had asked him a question he couldn't answer. "Who's lockstep?" the banker had said. "They hold your senior paper. Quiet outfit. Nobody at your shop seems to know who's behind it." Trevor had laughed it off at lunch and panicked about it after. Now he was in Dad's office demanding answers. "We've been paying these people for 2 years, and nobody knows who they are? Dad, that's insane. Get the lawyer. Find out who owns Lockstep." I sat at my desk near the bathroom with my heart going hard and my face doing nothing. Dad's voice, dismissive. "What does it matter? They restructured the note, they take the payments, they leave us alone. You found them, Trevor. You did the deal." A pause. A long one. Because Trevor knew he hadn't. Trevor had never found Lockstep. Trevor had no idea where the miracle came from, and for 2 years he'd let Dad believe he'd produced it. And now the lie had a loose thread, and my brother was holding it. "Right," Trevor said finally, quietly. "I did the deal." He let it go. He had to. To pull the thread on Lockstep was to admit he'd never held the rope in the first place. My brother's vanity saved me. He'd rather not know who owned the company than admit it wasn't him. I exhaled, slow, when he walked out. 10 more days. The thread held by exactly the thing that made my family what it was. Nobody wanting to look too closely at a story that flattered them. I went into the bathroom, ran the cold water, put my wrists under it until my pulse came down, and went back to my desk. 2 lives, 10 more days. The week before the dinner, I almost lost my nerve once. Trevor sent the family a photo. Him grinning, holding a plaque the Chamber of Commerce had given him. Young, Business Leader of the Year, for steering Hartwell Freight through crisis. My father had nominated him. My brother got a trophy with my work engraved on it, and the caption said, "So proud of this kid." I sat in my apartment and looked at that photo for a long time, and the old reflex came up. The one that had run my whole life. Let it go. Don't make it hard for him. Be fine. You're always fine. I almost did. That's the part I don't tell people. I almost folded one more time. Then I went and got Mom's china out of the box in my closet. The one teacup I'd quietly taken after the funeral. The only thing of hers I'd let myself keep. And I held it, and I thought about a 16-year-old who'd been told there was nothing left for her. And the reflex went quiet. I texted Ruth, my lawyer. We're doing it. Let's finalize. Before the dinner, I did the unglamorous work. This is the part the highlight reel skips. I met my lawyer. Her name was Ruth Calloway, sharp, 60, allergic to drama, which is exactly why I'd hired her. We sat in her office with the lockstep file open between us. You understand what you're holding, Ruth said. It wasn't a question. As of the maturity date, you can extend, you can renegotiate, or you can call the note. If you call it and they can't pay, and they can't, you're the secured party. Trucks, terminals, the operating entity. It moves to lockstep. I know. You'd own your father's company. I already own the only part that matters, I said. I own whether it lives. Ruth didn't smile, but something in her face approved. What do you want to do? I'd thought about this for weeks. About Mom, about the wine I hadn't poured yet, about Trevor's plaque. I'm not going to burn it down, I said. 70 people work there. I'm not Dad. I won't torch a building full of innocent people to make a point. Ruth nodded slowly. But the lie ends, publicly, and the terms change. Lockstep keeps the company alive, on my conditions, with my name on it, where everyone can see it. Dad spent 2 years deciding who gets the credit. Now, the credit is collateral. We drafted everything. The maturity notice, the renegotiation offer, generous to the workers, brutal to my father's ego. Full disclosure of Lockstep's ownership. A board seat for me. Trevor's VP of Strategy title gone. An independent audit of every deal he'd touched. And a single business card. Creamstock. Plain. Lockstep Holdings, and under it, one line. Camille Hartwell, Principal. One card? Ruth asked. He'll know what it means, I said. He's good with the boring stuff too. He just never thought I was. I had Ruth send the formal maturity notice to the company's registered agent. Legally required, easy to miss in a stack, so that by the night of the dinner, it would already be sitting in the company's mail, unopened, because nobody but me ever opened the mail that mattered. Then I bought a dress, dark green, nothing flashy, and I drove to my father's house to celebrate my brother. The dinner was at the house I grew up in. Long table, good china. Mom's china, which they still used and never credited her for, either. 12 people. The senior terminal managers, Dale and Priya. Our accountant, a careful man named Howard Brandt, who, I happen to know, had quietly tried to warn Dad about the note maturity and been ignored. Trevor and his fiancée, a sweet, nervous woman named Jenna, who kept looking to him for cues. Dad at the head. Me, seated where I always sat, the end nearest the kitchen. I got there early on purpose. I wanted to walk the house once before it stopped being the house I grew up in. Linda. No, there was no Linda. My father had never remarried. After Mom died, he'd married the company instead, and the company got all the love a wife would have. The house had gone cold and stayed that way. Same furniture, same family photos on the mantle. Trevor's graduation, Trevor's first day at the company, Trevor and Dad shaking hands at a ribbon cutting. One photo of me, 8 years old, before Mom died. After that, I just stopped appearing on the wall. I noted it. I'd stopped being hurt by it years ago, but I noted it. Trevor arrived loud, already telling a story. Jenna trailing behind him with a hostess gift. He clapped me on the shoulder. Camille, you came. Like the daughter showing up to her own family dinner was a charming surprise. Good for you. Wouldn't miss it, I said, and I meant it more than he could possibly know. Dale and Priya came together, work people in their nice clothes, slightly stiff in a house this size. Priya found me in the kitchen. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said warmly. "It's good. There should be more family at a family thing." She had no idea what she'd just said. Howard came last, alone, with the careful posture of a man who'd nearly canceled. He caught my eye across the room and gave the smallest nod. He still thought I was going to use the evening to make my father listen. In a way, I was. It started warm. It always started warm. Dad was expansive, refilling glasses, telling the comeback story for the 100th time. He had an audience that depended on him, and that's when my father was happiest. When the people listening couldn't afford to leave, I watched Howard the accountant get quieter as the wine went down, like a man sitting on a fire alarm he wasn't allowed to pull. Every time Dad said, "My son got us through it," Howard looked at his plate. He knew the numbers. He just didn't know yet that the woman across the table knew them better. I barely touched my wine. I needed my hand steady. I knew what they'd be holding before the night was over. Then Dad stood and tapped his glass. "I want to say something about family," he began. "2 years ago, we almost lost everything my father built, and one person in this family stepped up." He put his hand on Trevor's shoulder. "My son, he walked into those banks. He didn't take no. He saved Hartwell Freight." Applause. Real applause. Dale said, "Hear, hear." Priya raised her glass. Trevor did the modest hero head dip he'd been practicing for 2 years. Then Dad's eyes found me, and that mean little spark lit up that I'd seen my whole life. "To the son who saved this family's business," he said, glass high. And then, without dropping the smile, to me, "Camille, sweetheart, make yourself useful. Pour the wine." The table laughed, soft, embarrassed, but they laughed. The girl who's good with the boring stuff, pouring for the man who saved them. Here's the thing I have to be honest about. For 1 second, I almost didn't. For 1 second, the whole plan went thin and far away. And I was just a daughter being asked to pour wine at her father's table, while the room laughed, and the old want came up so hard, it almost knocked me down. Not the want for the company, the want underneath everything. I just wanted him, one time, to say my name, like it was a good thing, to toast me, to look at me the way he looked at Trevor. 31 years old, and the wound was still right there, fresh as a child's, and I hated that it was, and I couldn't make it not be. I waited for that to pass. It always passes. You learn that when you grow up invisible. The wanting passes if you just hold still long enough. Then I stood up. I picked up the bottle, and I poured. 12 glasses. Steady hand, no spill. I poured for Dale and Priya, who thanked me because they're decent people, and they didn't know what the wine was. I poured for Howard, who wouldn't look at me because he half knew. I poured for Jenna, who smiled the nervous smile of a guest. I poured for Trevor, who didn't even glance up, held his glass out without looking, the way you hold a glass out to staff. I came to my father last, and I filled his glass to the line, and he patted my arm like I was the help, and said, "Good girl." Good girl. 2 words. The closest to praise I'd gotten from him in years, and it was for pouring wine. I set the bottle down, and before I sat, I took one cream-colored business card out of my pocket, and I slid it across the table. To Trevor. He picked it up to be polite, read it, and the color left my brother's face like water out of a tipped glass. He set his wine down before I even reached my chair. "If you've made it this far, thank you. I know stories like this are heavy. Before the table turns, what do you think was on that card? Tell me your guess in the comments before I show you. Most people guess the company. Almost no one guesses the rest. Now let me tell you what my brother saw." Trevor stared at the card. Lockstep Holdings, Camille Hartwell, Principal. He looked at me, and I watched him try to make it mean something harmless. He couldn't. "What is this?" he said. Not loud. The first quiet thing he'd said all night. "It's the name of the company that owns the note," I said. Calm. The whole table could hear me. I didn't raise my voice. I never have to. "The senior debt on Hartwell Freight. The thing that's been keeping the lights on for 2 years. I looked at my father. It's mine, Dad. Lockstep is mine. I bought the note the night the bank said no. For 1 second, nothing moved. Then my father laughed, the recovery laugh, the one that had always worked. Camille, this isn't the place for one of your... The maturity notice is already in your office mail, I said. It went to the registered agent 11 days ago. Howard tried to tell you the note was coming due. You told him not to bother you with the boring stuff. Howard's head came up. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. That was step 1. The lie, stated out loud by the man who built it, to the son who saved this family's business. Now the table had heard the lie and the first piece of the truth in the same breath, and the air in my mother's dining room changed. Dad's smile held, but his eyes started working. You don't have the money to buy a note like that. You have a desk job. I have a finance degree and 9 years of your books, I said. I know exactly what that note cost, because I paid it. You want me to say the number out loud in front of your managers? I will. He didn't say yes. He just learned, in front of 12 people, that his daughter knew his numbers better than he did. Trevor found his voice, and his voice did what it always does. It got loud to cover that it was scared. This is insane. You bought our debt and hid it? That's a betrayal, Camille. You want to talk about betrayal? I reached into my bag and set a folder on the table. Not a flourish. I just put it down next to the wine I'd poured him. Open it. He didn't, so I opened it. First page. The fuel contract you renegotiated, Trevor. The one Dad praised. Here's the rate you signed. I slid it toward Howard, the accountant, because Howard would know. And here's the rate I locked the year before. You signed a worse deal and got a raise for it. Howard looked at both pages. He took his time, because Howard always takes his time, and the whole table waited on a quiet man for once in their lives. Then, professionally, he said the most damning thing a man can say at a celebration. She's right. The earlier rate is better. I flagged this at the time. It cost the company about $90,000 a year. He set the pages down gently. I have the memo. Step 2. First evidence on the table. And the first witness who couldn't be called jealous because Howard had nothing to gain and 20 years of credibility to lose. Priya turned to look at Trevor. So did Dale. These were people who'd taken pay freezes during the crisis, who'd been told the company couldn't afford raises while Trevor got hazard pay. $90,000 a year. They could do that math without a finance degree. Trevor's denial came fast and ugly. Anyone can print a spreadsheet. You've always been jealous of me. Dad, she's been planning this. She's trying to steal the company. I'm not stealing anything, I said. I'm holding it. There's a difference, and you'd know it if you'd ever read a contract instead of signing it. I took the second page out. Speaking of contracts you signed. Step 3 was Trevor denying, loud and flailing, looking to Dad to back him up the way Dad always had. And for the first time, Dad didn't jump in. Dad was still staring at the card. Step 4 was the page I laid down next. The terminal lease, I said. The one that nearly killed us. The one Dad blamed on the market. I turned it so the whole table could see the signature line. That's not the market, Dad. That's Trevor's signature. Your son signed the deal that almost ended the company you say he saved. Silence at the table now. Dale and Priya, the managers, these were people whose jobs lived and died on that lease, were staring at my brother. Priya said very softly, Gerald, is that his signature? My father didn't answer. He was looking at the lease like it might rearrange itself if he wanted it badly enough. Jenna, Trevor's fiancée, spoke for the first time. Trev, she said, small, you told me your dad signed that one. Shut up, Jenna, Trevor said. And there it was. The real him, leaking out at the edges, the way it always does once the script is gone. Jenna's face changed. She'd just learned something about the man she was going to marry, in public, at a dinner table, the same way I'd been learning things about my family my whole life. I felt sorry for her. I'd been her once, believing the loud one because the loud one is easier to believe. I let it sit. Then I delivered the last piece, and I delivered it quietly, the way you're supposed to deliver the thing that actually lands. "There's one more document," I said. "It's not about the company." I set it down in front of my father, not Trevor. "It's Mom's life insurance, the policy that named me. $15,000 for my college when I was 16. I watched his face. Somebody cashed it through the estate and spent it. The paperwork says where it went. It bought Trevor a car. The room went completely still. The kind of still that has a sound. This was the reveal, not the company. The company was just money. This was the thing. "You took the last thing my mother left me," I said, and for the first time all night, my voice was not perfectly steady. It cracked on the word mother, one small crack, and I let it. "And you never told me there was anything to take. For 15 years, I thought she left me nothing. She didn't leave me nothing. You just gave it to him." My father opened his mouth, closed it. And then he did the thing the man always does when the truth has him. He stopped defending and he attacked. "She was a child," he said too loud. "It was family money. Trevor needed a car and you never needed anything. You were always fine. You've always been fine. You don't get to come into my house and—" "There it is," I said, because that was step 7. That was my father losing control and telling 12 witnesses exactly who he is. You were always fine. The whole story of my life in 4 words, said out loud, in front of the managers, the accountant, the fiancé, and the empty chair where my mother should have been. Nobody at that table was looking at Trevor the hero anymore. They were looking at a 63-year-old man who just admitted he spent his dead wife's gift to his daughter on a Mustang because the daughter never needed anything. The silence after that had weight. Preya had her napkin pressed to her mouth. Jenna was openly crying now, quietly for a woman she'd never met and a girl she'd just watched get told the truth about her own childhood at a dinner party. Dale was staring at my father with something close to contempt. Dale, who'd taken a pay freeze on the promise that the family was all in this together. And my father, who could not stand silence, who had filled every silence of my life with the sound of his own importance, filled this one too. That was his nature, and his nature was the trap. "This is exactly why I never made a fuss over you," he said, louder, digging, the way a man digs when he's already standing in the hole. "You keep score. You always kept score. Trevor never kept score. Trevor just loved this family. And you sat in the corner counting, and now look at you. You bought your own father's debt so you could do this to him at a party. Who does that? What kind of person does that?" "The kind you raised," I said. "You taught me money was the only language this family respected. I just got fluent." He had no answer. He'd spent 2 years deciding I was worthless out loud, and he'd done it one too many times, in front of one too many people, and the last time he did it, I was holding the paper that owned his name. He'd built the gallows himself, plank by plank, every time he said, "She helps out in the office." All I'd done was stop holding the rope for him. Howard Brandt set down his napkin. "Gerald," he said, "the note's maturity is real. I need to understand the company's position. A working man pulling the fire alarm at last. Camille, as the creditor, what happens now?" And the whole table turned to me, the girl who poured the wine. Step 8, consequences. "Here's what happens," I said. I stood, because this part I wanted to say, standing. Lockstep Holdings holds the senior note due now. Hartwell Freight can't pay it. That means I could call it tonight and take the trucks, the terminals, the building, the name. All of it. Legally, cleanly, by morning. By... Trevor made a sound. His fiancée had her hand over her mouth. "I'm not going to," I said. I watched my father's face do something complicated. relief and shame in the same muscle. 70 people work at Hartwell Freight, I went on. Dale's people, Priya's people, they didn't do anything to me. I'm not Dad. I don't burn down a building full of innocent people to win an argument. I looked right at him when I said it. So, here are the terms, and they're not a negotiation. Lockstep renegotiates the note. The company lives. The workers keep their jobs. Dale exhaled. Priya closed her eyes. But I let the word land. Here are the terms, and they're written down, and they're already drafted, so don't waste anyone's time pretending to negotiate them. I laid the page out where Howard could read it, because Howard was the one person at the table whose opinion the company actually needed. 1. I take a seat on the board, in my name, on every document where everyone can see it. 2. An independent audit of every deal Trevor signed. Howard runs it, and Howard reports to the board, not to Dad. 3. The VP of Strategy title is gone. Trevor can earn a real job like the rest of us did. Or he can leave. His choice. 4. The pay freezes the working people took during the crisis come off, and the so-called hazard pay goes back where it belongs, to the drivers and the dock crew who actually carried this place. And 5. I looked at my father for this one. The story changes. The next time anyone in this family tells the comeback story, they tell the true one. I paused. Or I call the note, and you can tell the story to the bankruptcy trustee. My father sat in his own dining room at the head of his own table and understood that the chair was mine now. You do this to your own father, he said. Quiet. The recovery laugh was gone for good. No, Dad, I said. I'd save your company, again, out loud this time. For a long moment, nobody at the table moved. Then Dale, the North Terminal manager, the gruff, decent man who'd told me the floor crew trusted me, pushed back his chair and stood. I thought he was leaving. He wasn't. He looked at my father, and then he looked at me, and he said one quiet sentence that I will keep for the rest of my life. The crew always knew it was you, Camille. He nodded once. We just couldn't say it either. Then he sat back down. And that, not the documents, not the card, not even the note. That was the moment the room finished turning, because when the working people choose, everyone else follows. Priya reached over and put her hand flat on the table near mine, not holding it, just there, the way you stand near someone so they know they're not alone. Trevor saw the room move. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He stood up and tried to take it back by getting bigger. This is my company, he said, voice climbing. I'm the CEO in waiting. You think a piece of paper changes that? You think these people work for you? Sit down, Trevor, my father said. It wasn't on my side. It was just exhaustion. But Trevor heard it as a betrayal, and his face crumpled, and for 1 second, I saw the 8-year-old version of him from before the wall of photos, before all of it curdled. Then it was gone, and he grabbed his jacket and walked out of our father's house. And Jenna sat there a moment deciding, and then she followed him, slower, looking back once. The door closed. Nobody went after either of them. My father stayed in his chair at the head of the table he no longer controlled. If you've ever had to stop being the quiet one in your family, the one who fixes everything and gets thanked for nothing, I want to hear about the moment you finally said it out loud. Tell me below. I read everyone. I didn't call the note that week or the next. I'm not built like them. I did exactly what I said I'd do, which in my family was the most shocking thing of all. I kept my word. The renegotiation closed 11 days later in Ruth Calloway's conference room. My father came in person. He'd aged a decade in those 11 days, the way men like him do when the audience finally leaves and there's no one left to perform for. He sat across the table from me and his lawyer and mine, and he signed the papers that made Lockstep Holdings, that made me, a permanent secured creditor and board member of the company that bears his name. He signed each page slowly. He didn't read them. He never reads them. He just signed where the little flags pointed, the way I'd watched him sign things my whole life, except this time, the thing he was signing was the end of the version of himself where I didn't count. At the door, he stopped. "Your mother," he started, and then he couldn't finish it, and I let him not finish it, because I'd learned a long time ago not to hold my breath for that man's sentences. He left. That was the closest he ever came. The audit happened. It was worse than even I'd shown at the table. Trevor had signed 3 more deals nobody had read. A warehouse build-out that never got used, an equipment lease at a predatory rate, a consulting contract with a college friend that delivered nothing. Howard Brandt walked the board through all of it, page by careful page, and for the first time in 20 years, somebody in that company listened to the accountant. My father sat through every meeting now, because he had to, because the seat at the head of the table came with my name on the cap table behind it. Trevor lost the title that afternoon and the swagger over the following months. The Rotary presentation never happened. The Chamber of Commerce quietly took the plaque back when the story got around. And it got around, the way stories do in a small business town. Not from me, never from me, but from 12 people who'd been at a dinner. He took a dispatch job at the smallest terminal, a real job, the kind I'd done, because I gave him the choice between earning a paycheck and not having one, and to his credit, he took the work. The last I heard, he was, slowly, not terrible at it. He doesn't speak to me. I understand that. I didn't do it for his thanks. I'd watched him be handed everything, and watching him have to earn something was punishment enough. Grief and justice can be the same shape. Jenna didn't marry him. She sent me a single text 2 months later. "Thank you for that night." I never wrote back because there was nothing to add. Sometimes the truth is a gift you give people without meaning to. The managers, Dale and Priya, started bringing the real problems to me. Quietly at first, like they weren't sure it was allowed. Then, not quietly. A driver pay issue Dale had been sitting on for a year. I fixed it in a week. A dock safety problem Priya had raised 3 times and been ignored. Fixed. The freezes came off. The hazard pay that had gone to Trevor got redistributed to the people who'd actually carried the company through the bad years. The girl who'd been good with the boring stuff turned out to be good with the important stuff, because it had always been the same stuff. They just hadn't been allowed to see me do it. My father and I are not healed. I want to be honest with you about that, because the videos that promise the tearful reconciliation are lying to you. He apologized once, badly, for the party. Not for the years, just for the party, as if the party were the problem and not the proof. He has never once said the word insurance. He cannot make his mouth form the sentence about my mother's money. I've stopped waiting for it. I waited 31 years. That's enough. We see each other at board meetings. That's the relationship now. A quarterly agenda and a handshake that costs us both something. He calls me Camille in those rooms. Not sweetheart, because sweetheart died at that dinner table along with the version of him who got to decide what I was worth. Once, after a meeting, he lingered by the door and said, "You're good at this." It came out grudging and surprised, like he was reporting a fact that offended him. It wasn't the toast. It wasn't my name said like a good thing. But it was the closest he had, and I took it, and then I let it go, because I'd finally learned that I could not get the thing I'd wanted from a man who didn't have it to give. That was the healing. Not him changing, me stopping. I named the wound out loud to my own face in the mirror one morning. I wanted my father to choose me, and he never will. And I'm going to be all right anyway. And the saying of it was the thing that finally set it down. I built my own table. Howard's still my accountant. He reads me every memo cover to cover, and I read everyone back. 2 careful people finally allowed to do their jobs. Dale and Priya come to dinner. Real dinner, at my place, with people who say my name like it's a good thing, because to them it always was. The floor crew sends a card at the holidays signed by all 70 of them. I keep it on the fridge. It's worth more than a plaque. But the company has my name on it now, not on a desk near the bathroom, on the wall. Hartwell Freight, and under the logo my grandfather painted, a line on the ownership documents that anyone can read. Lockstep Holdings, Camille Hartwell, Principal. People ask me sometimes whether I regret it, whether I wish I'd just kept quiet, kept the company quietly alive in the dark, let Trevor keep his plaque and Dad keep his story. I think about it honestly, because I don't believe in revenge that you have to lie to yourself about. And the answer is no, but not for the reason people expect. I don't regret it because the night I slid that card across the table was the first night of my life I existed to those people at full size. Not the helpful one, not the boring one, not the girl near the bathroom. For 1 hour, in front of 12 witnesses, I was exactly as large as I had always been, and they had to look at the whole of me, and they couldn't shrink me back down because the documents wouldn't let them. I'd spent 31 years being told what I was worth by people who'd never once added it up. That night, the numbers spoke, and the numbers had always been on my side. The morning after, I woke up in my own apartment, and the air felt different. Lighter. I made coffee. I didn't check my phone for an apology because I'd finally stopped expecting one, and you have no idea how much room that frees up in a person. All the space you get back when you stop waiting to be chosen by someone who already showed you they won't. I kept one thing from that night, not the card. I gave Trevor the card. He can keep it. I kept Mom's china. I asked for it, and for once, nobody argued, because for once, they understood what would happen if they did. I eat off it now, in my own place, the plates she chose. Sometimes I set a glass at the empty spot across from me. I don't say anything dramatic to it. I just pour the wine. Slowly, the way I did that night, except now I pour it for her. And for me. My father thought he was teaching me my place when he handed me that bottle. He was right that it was a lesson. He was just wrong about who was learning it. I was never the girl who poured the wine. I was the one who owned the table. They just couldn't see me until I let them. And I'm done being invisible to people who only look up when the lights are about to go out.